Hi, I'm Miriam. Granny Keto now. Used to be Keto My Way, so some of you were following me from that. But I wanted to make this first video to introduce you to keto and a little bit about myself. I think that if you've been keto and you've done some research on this, you've learned and you've heard the expression, you have to know your why. You have to find your why. Losing 20 pounds for a wedding or something like that, that's not going to sustain you. Keto is really a lifestyle. It is a diet, but it is a lifestyle. You have to make a lot of changes in the way you eat and in the way you look at things, and so your why is very important. I didn't want this to be staged where I memorized something, so if you forgive me, I may be looking at my notes just to make sure I don't miss any points, because your why is so important. My first why, my line in the sand was I did not want to get diabetes. Period. I wanted to improve my numbers. I wanted to be healthy. And I learned about keto. A friend of mine recommended Gary Taub's Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. And that was the biggest eye opener for me. I have to tell you, there were parts that I almost cried when I finally realized it was the food. It was the food that was raising my insulin, that was keeping me fat, that was keeping me my cravings going. Um, Unbelievable to learn that it wasn't all my fault. I don't want to say it wasn't my fault at all, but mostly it wasn't my fault. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't dumb. I wasn't any of that. I was just eating the wrong food. And I learned about keto, and that's where my journey started with Gary Taub's book. So my first thing was to lose weight to get healthy. However, I learned through Gary Taub's and a lot of other reading that I did right at the very beginning was that you don't get healthy by losing weight, and that's where everything has been wrong. You get healthy and the weight loss will come. So you reduce your insulin and you eat healthy, and once all your hormones are stable and you're eating intelligently, that weight will come off. So my first why was to be healthy. And that I think that no, my first why was to lose weight. But when I knew about keto and I understood keto, that became my why was to get healthy. The weight loss was beside the point, a wonderful side effect, but I was getting healthy. And just to throw out a number, a good fasting insulin is 5 or below. My insulin, it may have been higher at some point, but my insulin was 46.5. That was a recordable high insulin, fasting insulin. It's now 12. I haven't had a blood test for a few months. It could very well be close to 5 at this point. So my first why was answered. And once that was reached, I wanted to this so I started keto in December, and my daughter had a baby in May, and I was going to stay with the baby when her maternity leave was up, and I was giving an extra month to the baby before he was going into daycare. So my second why was to learn the logistics of keto. How could I stay keto even away from home, even away from everything that was familiar, cooking for my daughter, cooking for my granddaughter and my son-in-law. And so this became my second why, was how can I make this work for me? And those of you who have followed me through Keto My Way understand that Keto My Way was fully about the journey. Do I track or do I not track? Do I count carbs? Do I count net carbs or total carbs? Do I weigh and measure? I mean, there were a lot of questions that I went through. What foods would, even if they were keto, would send me into a binge? I had been a binge eater, and I found that when I at the beginning, I can have them now, but when I started, if I started with the baked goods and the treats and the fat bombs, if they were the least bit sweet or they were the least bit a treat, I would binge. It took me a long time to get through that. And then after I made it through my daughters, I wanted to know for myself, how can I really make this a permanent change and work through the roots of my issues that I was still stumbling over, even though I had been keto for quite a while. There were still things, like I said, with the binging, and I had to learn for myself not to have the treats and the baked goods. But what could I do that would really make a difference? And that's when I signed up for coaching. And I was working with my coach, and I found I found ways not just to make it work with my family, but ways to make it work with my history and make me successful no matter what I might be facing. And then my coach suggested that maybe I should consider being a coach. So my why became doing keto in a way that I could walk the walk and talk the talk. And it was important for me to be authentic so that I could coach you, and that I understood things and I understood the problems and I understood how to go through the darkness and come out the other side. And this then became my why. And I wanted to be able, uh, not just to look at my own things, but to appreciate that what other people are going through. And during this time, I had many, many horrible crises. My sister died in California, and I had been out there a month on an emergency visit, and I stayed with her. Actually, she was already in the hospital, but I stayed at her apartment and I visited her every day into the hospital. And then she went into hospice, and we knew she wouldn't be returning. And I closed up her condo for sale, and all the meals in a restaurant, or all the meals at the hospital, or all the meals grab and go. And I did it, and I stayed strong. And I came home, and we had her funeral here. 3 weeks later was my mother's funeral. Um, and I stayed strong and I stayed through keto. I realized that no amount of chocolate and no amount of ice cream and no amount of pizza and no amount of any of that was going to change what happened with my sister, what happens with my mother. And I was finally on my way saying, okay, now I can really concentrate. I can really concentrate on my why. And then my husband had a called a AAA, an aortic aneurysm, and 30% of the people that this happened to make it to the hospital. That means 70% don't survive the hospital. And out of those 30% that survive, 70% don't survive the surgery, if there's even surgery. And he was among the tiny, tiny fraction that survived this. And he was in intensive care, and it was during terrible power outage, and I didn't have power, and I was sleeping at the hospital. I wheeled in a cot, and I set up in the waiting room at intensive care, and I stayed there, and I stayed keto. And it was it was comforting. I could control what went in my mouth. I could control my outcome. I couldn't control what was happening with my husband. He did survive. He did come home. He is doing very well. But it made me realize that initially losing weight and fitting into a dress last August wasn't going to get me through all of this. I realized that I'm, I could cut this out, but you need to see me thinking about this. I needed to realize that keto was going to keep me healthy and keep me strong and make me able to care for my husband and care for my family and do what needed to be done. And so I realized it was time to take the plunge. I took a healthy, nutritional health coaching class so that I would be able to coach you. And I took the plunge, and you see behind me, I'm now Granny Keto. My journey, you're always learning and you're always moving, but that journey about should I track and should I count net carbs and all of that, that portion of the journey is done. And now my journey now is to move on and help you. And I am now Granny Keto. And so that's what I wanted to share with you, is that you have to find your why. And the short term why, okay, I wanted to bring my numbers down and I wanted to be healthy. Okay, done. Now what? Okay, learning how to cook for my family. Done. Now what? Okay, working with my coach and learning how to sustain it and taking classes so that I could be a coach. Done. Now what? Moving on and helping you is now my why. And I had to travel through all those other whys to get here. And I want to help you find your why. It's important. It will sustain you. It will get you to where you need to go. My why, you can see, changed many, many times. And it sustained me and it got me here and it made me Granny Keto, and I couldn't be happier. So please come visit grannyketo.com. We have Granny's Table, we have Ask Granny Keto, we have blogs, everything to make it a good program for you and to help you find your why and to help you find your way. Thank you.